Hello, and welcome to Curmudgeon in the Cellar number 38. Who'd have thought I'd ever done this many, and who'd have thought anybody'd still be listening? And if you're interested and you haven't already, how about subscribing? Maybe one day I'll get enough that subscribers that I'll get a wardrobe sponsor or a drink sponsor. Like that's likely to happen. However, if you get a really cool shirt, I might wear it. Anyway, enough of that. It's a couple, 3 things, 4 things, several things, 6 things. Talk about this evening. We'll start with answering some questions. And these are questions that came in over the last week or so. Question for the next Curmudgeon, if you'd be so. What was the creative process when you put together a Dragon magazine back in the day? Did you have a theme for each issue? Would art ever inspire writing? Good questions. No, we didn't do a theme issue until maybe it was 4 or 5 when we did a cover on the Empire of the Petal Throne, and we did a lot of articles on the Empire of the Petal Throne. It was the only time that I was really, hey, we ought to do, from higher up above. However, I was okay with that because our mindset at that time was we were trying to expose people just to as many possible permutations of gaming and as many possible ideas to lift from, that the idea of a whole issue was worth the crapshoot. It didn't pay off, but it was worth the crapshoot. Normally, no, there was not a theme. In the first 3, maybe 4, it was, what kind of good stuff do I have? I'd been collecting better articles, longer articles, since I had taken over the strategic review. And I was, in most cases, I'd drop a postcard and say, "Ooh, I like your stuff. I'm going to use it. I'm saving it for later use." And I'm sorry, I just looked down. I saw my vaporizer is done charging, and it's flashing at me, telling me that it's completed its appointed task. There we go. So anyway, back where I was. So I had saved up a bunch of good articles, or what I thought were better than average, at least from what I'd been receiving, and also they were not written by us. And so when it came time to put out those first few, it was, okay, what do we have? What's here? I had the first issue. I had the cover of the first issue already done. It was drawn by a good friend of mine. He was originally a teacher of mine, and we became good friends later. And he drew a couple, 3 covers for me and several interior pieces, named Bill Hannon. And he did my first cover, which I own. I don't know if the Wizards are aware of that, but I own that art. In any event, obviously it had to have a dragon on the front because it was Dragon Magazine, and we were announcing ourselves. Ta-da, here we are. So it was a rather stark, simple design. We didn't have a lot of time to Bill didn't have a lot of time. I really wanted to, I kind of wanted that severe, stark, just here it is on white, there's a dragon. I wanted to make that impression. And we would just, as issue after issue came up, it was a mix. I tried to find an editorial mix that I liked. I held, and still hold the conceit that I have a pretty good eye, ear, brain, think, whatever, of what people will like and what popular opinion, where it'll go. And so sometimes I was able to anticipate, sometimes I was able to nudge. I felt it was my duty as an editor, as a person that was letting all the water possibly in to raise all these boats, to expose people to as many interesting things as I could. So I made everyone as big a variety as I could. We had fantasy stuff, we had D&D stuff, we had board games, we had other stuff. When the magazines combined back together, Little Wars and Dragon, after after it didn't work so well. Then it was truly a blend of a little of this, a little of that. Always my philosophy was, what's fun to play, what's new and looks like it's going to be fun to play, or is new and is fun to play because we got to see it first. And I saw Dragon as my soapbox where I could stand up and go, hey, man, look at all these cool games. Look at all this fun. And so a cover never inspired an issue. An issue inspired a cover. Obviously, the Empire of the Petal Thrones was tied together. I can't really think. They did change as we went along. When we did a story, Tramp did a double cover for me. I think it was 13. It was a story of a retelling of an Irish myth, epic myth, and so that cover was drawn for that story because I believe I got that story. I think it was a Gar Fox story that I was reprinting, or else it was a Lynn Carter. It might have been a Lynn Carter that I got rights to reprint. In any event, that one tied to the story. That cover was tied in, and that cover used to hang on my wall. And really, I don't think we did too many themed covers. I don't. I might, like if it was a Christmas issue, I recall I did I think it was, well, I don't remember if it was an Errol or Jeff, but I did a Christmas issue with the toy soldiers marching out from beneath the tree and raising hell in the living room. So occasionally we'd do a cover that would coincide with seasonally. Of course, the most famous of those was a back cover that we did that hangs a few feet over from me. That's the famous Christmas picture that Tramp drew of all of us original TSR people in the sleigh or falling out of it or clutching onto it, with me whipping the team of dragons on into the night sky. We didn't have the luxury. I didn't have the luxury of a staff. I didn't have the luxury of being able to plan long enough out to be able to get a good artist and give them enough time to give, that they wanted to do something quality. That came later, after the first 10, 12, maybe 15 issues, that we were able to start planning far ahead for a cover story. But that was much later. And then after I left, of course, they did, I did abstracts. I did a couple of abstracts, and they related to something that was in there, sort of. But if you didn't, in the one that I thought was so cool, and so many people didn't see what I saw, that one didn't work well. Art ever inspire the writing? No. However, yes, in a small way. The physical sculpture of that little plastic, funny-looking figure that we all know and love as the land shark certainly inspired me to make a monster based on its morphology, the way it was built, and I extrapolated on that. So sometimes that happened, but I know that's not where you were going. I just stuck it in there anyway. Something I still do. I look at something, and years ago I was working on a mod for a computer game called Age of Wonders, and a friend in New Zealand said, hey, I'm doing this update of a mod, a patch. Would you be interested? And I said, I don't know. I've never done anything like this. This was like in 2004, and I wasn't back into the industry yet. And he sent me a bunch of sprites, and I looked at them. I said, oh, and I knew who they were. And that's how I realized that I still had some creative juices that I hadn't tapped in many, many years. If not using chainmail or swords and spells, what combat system would you recommend for bigger battles? Little Wars, Tactics 2, or something else? Well, I guess I'd have to ask how you define a bigger battle. Because Swords and Spells is really for mass army combat. Chainmail is for abstract, quicker combat where you're not keeping track of all the hits and hit points and and whatever. Though you can take chainmail and tweak it and say, okay, these guys all take they all got to be killed twice because they're the uber super heavy infantry. Whatever, you can tweak and do that. If you were looking at 40 guys a side, I don't know. There's some skirmish rules out there, particularly some British, several sets of British skirmish rules that there's even a couple that involve, fighting Zulus and whatever. They have a heavy hand-to-hand aspect. You could probably find something like that and modify it. I guess my first question is, what kind of campaign is going to involve, an Uber battle? I know an answer to that. We at TSR we did have those kind of battles in Greyhawk. There is a campaign that's been going on here in Ohio forever and ever called the Falmouth campaign, whereas they don't get into the individual role playing, but it's a fantasy setting. And I have these massive battles with hundreds and hundreds of figures on the side. And they have their own homebrew set of rules. It's literally about this many type pages. It's enormous. I mean, the magic section alone is over half the book. I really don't know. I guess I'd ask what kind of, to give you a better answer, I'd have to know, what kind of battling are you doing in your campaign? Are you fighting off hordes of orcs? My question would be, how many orcs is in your horde? And it's really hard to answer. I mean, if you're only talking 12 or 15 characters, like NPCs and stuff, that's rather easy to handle just under the D&D rules. But you say larger battles. How big is big? And again, there's I think they're called Savage something or other. It's a British set of skirmish rules that would probably work. I believe there's a set of skirmish rules that are based on French, what we call the French and Indian War here in the States. I believe there's a set out there also. I would ask your British friends what they might suggest, because they're much more into skirmishes with 60 or 70 individual characters on a side, but they're not role-playing each character. I'm very intrigued by a lot of the skirmish rules. Look quite interesting. There's sets for Vikings, Viking period, and there's other sets available. Again, they're English. You'd have to have a very well-stocked game store in this country to just walk in and find them, I think. But there's a couple of them that I think are quite well worth looking at, because when they came out a few years ago, I read up on them extensively, and War Games Illustrated, they used to pimp British games pretty well. So if you can find an online archive of that, then I would go in and search skirmish rules and see what you come up with. Let's see, next question. What do you think could be the potential of D&D and tabletop gaming as a whole? There's a lot of talk about these days about what D&D is and what it can be as the game loses its stigma as a boys-only hobby. Could it reduce over time to a purely social experience, transform into something else, or are the waters still too muddy to tell? That's a hell of a question. Contrary to what a misguided young individual with a famous last name very famously blurted out a couple of months ago, tabletop gaming is far from dead. In fact, at the same time that they were that camp was uttering that nonsense, major publications were saying that it's never been bigger, it's never been more popular. Anybody that's running any kind of conventions can tell you what their attendance is, how their attendance has grown. I mean, if you just don't screw up, you're bound to have more people every year. If you do it well, you'll have lots. There are cons now that are looking at having to cap tickets because they can't find a venue that's workable. Cons that have been clipping along at 800, 1,200 at a time in the last 5 years are finding themselves pushing up 2,500, 3,000 people. It's booming. Is it a boys only game anymore? No. But I'm really, really, really getting sick of some of the strident behavior chastising that image of boys only. I'm really getting tired of some of the social justice warriors beating on that drum. If you want to come play at my table, come on and play at my table. Just leave all your politics at home. Because we're not here to play politics at my table. We're here to have fun and play some role playing. And the roles aren't political. I don't play political games unless you want to play junta. And then, well, that's as political as it gets and as vicious as it gets. Great old game, by the way. A heavy element of role playing in it. So I recommend you if you find a copy of that. Anyway, back to where I was. I believe it's losing a lot of its stigma. I believe that if we are assiduous in our pursuit of hygiene, that we will lose more of our stigma. And as that stigma dissipates, we'll have more participation from the female sex involved with the male sex, playing games, having fun, and nobody's feeling oppressed by the other one. It really bothers me when some of the strident, shrill cries out there about being excluded, and that I can honestly say, from the day I started playing, if a female had wanted to play at my game, I'd have said, sit down, let's have a good time. You can be on Amazon. I don't care what stereotype we want to use, because we all played stereotypes back then. That's all we had to go on, was assuming a stereotype. I've always been inclusive. Always. I got my pee-pee whacked a couple of years ago because I tried to be too inclusive and I used offensive terminology, apparently. So that taught me don't be a good Samaritan anymore. I don't believe it's dying. I think it's very strong. When we say tabletop gaming, though, don't think it's just role-playing. It's not just sitting around rolling dice. It's also board games. Board games are very, very popular. There are taverns in many, many big cities, including here in Cincinnati, that is their theme, is board games. They've got huge libraries of board games. You come on in, you get a couple of beers, you grab a game, you go get a table, you order some finger food later on while you're playing the game. You spend a couple hours there playing the game, having a beer, playing with your friends. That didn't look to me like it's dying. Now that they have actually recognized a medical diagnosis of video game addiction, I think that other camp may want to start doing some fire extinguishing and painting a different picture, a different color. Let's see. Another question. How long have I been babbling? When did novels become products of TSR, and was that something Gary had any thoughts on integrating into the company besides the short stories written in Dragon Magazine in the early days of D&D? Well, they became products after I left, and I rather imagine Jim Ward can probably answer this better, but I'm sure it has something to do with the fact that they brought Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss in, who were big-time writers. Before that, or we became big-time writers, I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on any of them. I love both of them dearly. that was to this whole new concept of the Raven Loft, and we'll write books to go with it. Books and fiction and the magazine have always been linked. We ran fiction pieces as well, other than the Garrison Ernst crappy parts. We ran them. I ran the ones I did, got the reprint rights on the Fritz and the Carter, and it was the Camp, I guess. Yeah, it was Osprey the Camp that was the one we did the cover for. Anyway, we ran those to give people ideas to lift from, because not everybody read all the books that we had read. We hadn't published the infamous appendix yet, and so we put those stories in to give people ideas to lift out of. That's what we did back then. There was nothing but books and stories, short stories to go read, and then morph out of them through your brain's filter into an adventure game. So that's why we published it then. It was very much hated early on. Garrison Ernst might have had something to do with that. And it wasn't until I published a few and people started to like it, and then they quit doing it and people complained about it. And at least that's what I was told, that, you know, they were upset when the company dropped fiction and they no longer did it. Of course, there's no room for fiction in a house organ, is there? So no, we had absolutely, in the early days, no, we had no plans. The only thing that they were working on while I was there before I left, and again, this was in the other division, so I only had peripheral knowledge of it, was Rose Estes was writing the page flippers, you know, read your own adventure things. She was doing that. I don't even know if any of them had been published by the time I left, but I know that she had at least a couple, 3 in the can. I think they were planning on doing them, having several in the can before they started rolling with it. Lessons learned, finally. So in that regard, that's the only books that I know that were purpose built. And then the rest came on as marketing. As the game evolved, the game morphed, the setting, the idea of settings took over. And here again, settings took over because there still weren't enough people that could make their own stuff up. And okay, recognizing that, TSR said, fine, you can't filter all these things out of Appendix N and all that. Fine, we'll give you a whole world. We'll give you a whole setting. Hence Greyhawk and Ravenloft and all the others that came, you know, all that came afterwards. Hey, the fact that Margaret and Tracy are good writers, great writers, now that was good, wasn't it? That was lucky. That's the questions. Now I got a couple of, I'm going to go on a rant. I'm going to get a little curmudgeonly. My first one. First, I got to wet up for this one. At what point do we stop redefining or reading a new meaning into something very old? I saw something the other day, of course, on social media, where I get most of my entertainment and a good deal of my frustrations and a lot of my face smacking for wondering how people can be so stupid. Tipping is racist. Seems like everything nowadays, somebody's going to figure out a way to make it racist. Quite frankly, I'm getting pretty sick of that. And before anybody goes woo-woo on me, if you saw a group picture of my family, you'd think we were the Rainbow Coalition. So yeah, I got liberal ideas in that regard. Everything's racist. Tipping is racist because the waiters were underpaid and they were black, and the evil restaurant owners saw a way to underpay the blacks that had fled the South and done the big migration to the North by encouraging tipping. And so it's racist. Well, that's a big stretch. A real big stretch. And I'll tell you why in a second. The other thing I saw, and this, I guess this website should be called "Everything is Racist." That this is about racist terms, and that the term "peanut gallery" is racist. That one really smacked me hard. Now, okay, I was born in 1949, and I watched the original Howdy Doody kids program, one of the very first children's programs on television. And all the kids that got to come into the audience during the show sat in the peanut gallery. And Clarabelle was the clown, was over there, okay? And it had kind of a circus connotation. Now, this Everything is Racist website says that peanut gallery is a racist, denigrating term because it refers to the balcony where the people that were sloppy and ate peanuts sat, and those were minorities. Well, before the black migration out of the South after the end of the Civil War, who sat in those seats in the balcony before the African Americans? Irish. They come to mind. Until the migration of blacks out of the South in great numbers, the Irish were the oppressed people in the cities, particularly. And before them, I'm sure it was somebody else that people didn't like. And later on, it was the Italians. Okay. But Everything is Racist, or whatever the hell this weird website is finding all these ways to take old terms and old words and find a very narrow application and now suborn this word and condemn it, or this phrase or this term, because it's racist. I got a problem with this. Do we really have to look this far? Don't we have enough things that we can solve right now without trying to correct our grammar and our word choices and our word selections? It's racist? Oh, yeah. Peanut gallery's racist. Sorry, Howdy Doody. I guess all those years that I would have given anything to sit in those seats with all those shouting, screaming kids, I guess I really wanted to be a racist. Sorry. And now I'm going to go on a rant. That one wasn't much. That was a warm-up. I saw a phrase on some page somewhere that just kind of set me off. Character optimization. Well, let's look at that phrase. If it was your trainer, your physical trainer at the gym, telling you that he was going to optimize your fitness, that would be one thing, because he's going to make you sweat and he's going to build up your stamina and all these kind of things. He's going to optimize you. Character optimization is a phrase and a principle that I have seen misused so many times, it just sickens me. It is nothing but a new way of min-maxing. it's well known that I don't like character skills, capital S skills and capital A abilities. Don't like that at all. Don't like any of that stuff. If you're going to role play. If you were auditioning for a piece, a play, a part in a movie, they're not going to tell you that the character that is trying to sell this detergent has a knack for finding pollywogs in the stream, is able to leap 12-foot chasms, and can work a Rubik's Cube in a minute and 58 seconds. They're not going to tell you now, play that character. They're going to say, okay, you're selling detergent. You're a harried housewife. These are the lines. Give us a good reading. Character optimization is not something that should be capitalized. Character optimization should be a final goal, an achievement. After playing a character for hours and hours and hours, and you build him up and buffed him up, and you found what you needed, you were able to find that book to read that gave you another intelligence point. You were able to find that scroll that enabled you to increase your dex or your constant. You found that formula to increase your constitution. You've over all this period of time, you have optimized your character through the role play. I honestly do not see the appeal of walking up with a shiny, newly minted character that you know everything about and knocking on your first dungeon door, shiny sword in hand. Oh, here I am, ready to adventure. Character optimization is something that should take place over weeks and months and perhaps even years. As you build that character up, you round them out, and then one day you retire them. Character optimization is not a bunch of phony, go do this and you can buff up, go do that and you can buff up. Go to this school and you have these skills. Now, that's not to say that if in a campaign I was running, I had a couple of thieves that were interested in, hey man, I really need a leg up to, what can I do? And they had a lot of money burning a hole in their pocket. Not to say that I might not let them go and roll in a master lockpicking class for a lot of their loot. Okay. But that's in game. Character optimization in game is called role playing. And it's called, when you're my age and look back, it's called the accumulation of all the mistakes and all the right decisions and all the luck and all the ill luck that's happened to you. Min-maxing a character is absolutely, utterly foreign to me. It's not to say I don't play min-max games. Absolutely. I play Train Station on my computer way more than I ought to. And I min-max the hell out of that. I play the old hippies version of Farmville called Pot Farm. And I min-max the hell out of that. I've got billions of dollars from stuff I raised and sold and raised and sold and raised and sold and gone up in levels and all that. Yeah, min-max games can be fun. But min-maxing a character before you even really get going, min-maxing ought to just, it just ought to be stuff you find. It's just like, how many times you're going to roll the dice till you get some numbers you want. You'll a good camp. Roll 3 6s 7 times. Throw out the lowest one. Let's play it. I don't care where you assign them. Make of it what you will. That's role playing. Oh well. That's my old man's nag about it. Almost 4th of July. Don't blow any fingers off. Don't blind yourself looking into the tube to see why the mortar didn't go off. And I think that's everything I had on my list to talk about tonight. Let's see, was there anything else? No, can't think of anything else. So I guess I'll say good night. Happy 4th of July.